Hello, everybody. Good part of day. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening and watching us from, or depending on which time you are listening to it on your podcast player. I'm very happy to be here. I'm Rafael Gonçalves, the communications coordinator for KoreTalkX. This is Core Talks number 13. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the cannabis business, which is controversial by itself. It's growing a lot as well as a market. And I'm here with Brian McDonald from Markville Capital. Brian, I'm very happy to have you here. Welcome. The stage is yours.
Awesome. Rafael, thanks so much. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me today. We're excited.
That's very good. That's nice. So tell us a little bit more about you, Brian, about your background, about what Arcville does, about what you guys do, how you guys work. Tell a brief introduction of you and your company, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is what some would consider very traditional with traditional financial services. So for the last 15 years, I've worked at very large asset management firms, raising capital into different fund structures. So whether it be a hedge fund, an ETF, a mutual fund, etc. And so I did that very successfully in the United States, calling on a subset of advisors. And those advisors were typically registered investment advisors or family offices or independent broker dealers. So always focused on the financial advisor community. And so through that experience, I saw an opportunity with a mutual connection at my prior firm to enter into the cannabis industry. And the reason that I say that there's an opportunity is that there's something that's somewhat missing in the cannabis industry, and that is the financial advisor being a part of the equation. And so that's the opportunity, yet it's also the challenge, and that's really why I was so excited to join Arcview Capital. So to take a step back, Arcview Capital is a registered broker-dealer. We are an affiliate of the Arcview Group, and the Arcview Group has been involved and an advocate for the cannabis industry for the past 12 years. So we're really well known and positioned very well in the cannabis industry. And what we're trying to do at Arcview Capital is not only leverage that expertise, that brand, that reputation in the cannabis industry, but get it to transcend into traditional financial services. So we're very excited about everything that's going on, and we know that it's not the easiest of markets and the asset class and the area that we're focused on, but because it is a tough road, that's also what makes it so rewarding.
Yeah, that's nice. And just before we went live, you were telling me about something that just happened in the USA, right? About Joe Biden. I believe
right.
You can explain it better than I can.
That's right. And so I don't want to misquote anything or speak out of line here, but today's October 6th, and Joe Biden just announced that at a federal level, he's going to be pardoning anybody that's been arrested for any simple arrest for the possession of cannabis. So that's going to have major impacts on markets and the like. So we'll see how everything evolves from here. But one of the things that very interesting about the asset class, just in general, is that everybody's always talking about federal legalization. And when does federal legalization happen? That's certainly an important part. But almost a bigger part is just when does normalization happen? When does society accept this? Not only accept it for the medicinal uses, but also just for adult use consumption, just like anything else, whether it be alcohol, tobacco, etc. So as that normalization continues to take place, we think that it'll just create more and more opportunities for companies to flourish and to find different niches and different clientele that they can service throughout not only this industry, but others as well, because it does touch so many different industries that people don't really realize today.
Yes, exactly. That's rather important to mention because the normalization, right? Because society and culture and not long ago, at least here in Brazil, not long ago, people still thought it was strange for women to drink beer. I mean, what's
Right.
wrong with that, right? But this normalization comes with time, of course, and the federal legalization, I believe, would be the first step. And of course, we're talking about it in October 6th, 2022. So things may change in the future or not. I mean, but this is definitely a huge step, right? A huge step.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the analogy that I always like to give is that when I tell people that I'm in the cannabis industry and involved in the cannabis industry, just generally speaking, people always have some sort of idea in their mind and preconceived kind of stereotype. And that stereotype is all based on their own personal experience and what their experience around cannabis has been. So whether that's, with a few friends behind a garage, a bad experience, a good experience, it doesn't matter. They always relate it to that experience. And what I always like to say is, well, it has such a broader and wider impact and can have a broader impact. And the analogy that I like to give is, there's a 65-year-old woman, right? And this 65-year-old woman who has never consumed cannabis in her life, do you think that she's going to go into a store and buy a pre-rolled joint? The answer is probably not, right?
Hmm.
But would she feel comfortable if she's in her local drugstore walking down the aisle and she has trouble sleeping at night and picking up something in a pill form that looks like everything else on the shelf
Hmm.
that has
Yes.
a part of the cannabis plant inside of it that maybe is coupled with something like melatonin or fill in the blank that is just going to help her sleep at night? She will probably buy that and consume that. That's a whole different demographic than the people that are looking for pre-rolled cannabis, right? So it's just another way to think about it, and just one example as to how wide and far this industry can go.
Yes, exactly. And health, the health industry can benefit a lot, right? Because it's a natural compound. So,
Right.
I mean, I see it. I always say that inside CoreConnect when we're talking about cannabis, I see cannabis as a technology, as research and technology. The same way we can research any kind of plant or any kind of tree or fruit or any natural extract. I mean, it's there, right? It's there, and it's research, it's technology, it's research and technology. That's basically how I think about it. I
That
mean,
Yeah, that's exactly right. And if you look at history and if you look at what has taken place over the past few decades, any research that was done around the plant, not all, but a lot of the research was trying to show what was wrong with the plant, why it was bad for you. And
mhm.
now, just over the past few years, as the attitude has changed, as society has approached it and viewed it differently, now the studies aren't around why it is bad for you, but how can some of the molecules within the plant actually benefit you? And how could we do things that are actually productive and helping society? So the attitude is definitely changing, and it's just we are just scratching the surface. That's absolutely right.
Yes, scratching the surface. Yeah, but you got to start somewhere, right? You got to climb the ladder. You always have the first step. So
That's right.
maybe history will tell us if this first step that Joe Biden just gave today, maybe, who knows, who knows. But so let's move on from the medical side, because we are not specialists on that.
That's right. I am
Uh, so
not.
so you you talked about normalization, and what do you believe that is the benefit for companies to work with a broker dealer that is open to talk about cannabis?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And this is something that we're super excited about because as the Farm Bill passed, and when the Farm Bill passed, that was a very big deal in the United States, and that made hemp federally legal. And to work with a broker dealer that's focused on the cannabis industry, and we're not just focused on the cannabis industry, right? We're focused on the
Hmm.
cannabis industry and other emerging industries, whether it be psychedelics, cryptocurrencies, etc. But because of our relationship and our affiliation with the ArcView Group, we have tremendous insights into the cannabis industry. We can obviously rely on our partners that we have internally for different data points, for research, for commentary, anecdotal information, consumer trends, etc. And by having those insights and those partnerships, that really gives us a competitive advantage. And so for an individual company looking to work with a broker dealer, obviously we feel like if it's something that's in our industry and in our focus and specialty, we just have a unique advantage that others just simply do not. And being affiliated with the RFU Group, who's been around for 12 years, they've been able to see firsthand the evolution of the industry and how things have changed so dramatically. Because I myself have only been involved in the cannabis industry for the past 2 years. And just in the past 2 years, I've seen how so much has evolved, right? Everything from insurance to banking to fill in the blank. There are just so many different aspects of the industry that if you don't know how to navigate them, it could be very, very challenging for somebody.
Yeah, I also have have some numbers here. The U.S. cannabis market size was valued at $10.8 billion in 2021. I mean, you can't ignore that, right?
You,
You,
you, you, you can't ignore it, right? And what's remarkable is just the amount of growth that has taken place in the industry. And I know that, Raphael, you'll appreciate this. And it's something that a lot of people in just general crowdfunding in general will speak about is the amount of jobs that it creates. The amount of jobs that it creates at the local community is really just, it's head scratching to some people. There are so many people that are now employed involved and around just the general cannabis industry that rewind the clock a few years ago, they weren't there. And as more and more
Mhm.
states pass legislation, it's just creating more and more opportunities. And
Yes.
people will draw the kind of conclusion, okay, somebody's going to open up a storefront and there's a retail store, and that's kind of where they think it ends. But there's so many other ancillary companies and industries that go around it, whether it be folks that are doing delivery, right? The folks
Hmm.
that are actually growing the plant. If there's a processing company, if there's a co-packaging company, right? If there's people doing medical research around it. So
Hmm.
it really does go far beyond just the storefront that a lot of people think is
Yes.
the end all of the cannabis industry. That's obviously one vital aspect, but there's a whole lot more to it.
Yeah, the ecosystem is huge, right? You have agriculture, you have medical research, you have the storefront sales, the adult use. I mean, you have a huge ecosystem. It's so much larger than we can imagine. And yes, you have jobs, you have taxes, you have research, you have legal dollars, right? It's a way to make economy grow as well, right? Because it cannot be ignored. I cannot believe that it would take a $10 billion market and ignore it just for social reasons. I mean, it has to be discussed, of course, just like we do with alcohol. There are restrictions on alcohol usage and commerce throughout the world, and it's fine,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's fine. I mean,
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's a lot of anecdotal information and statistical information that backs up the fact that throughout the pandemic, as people were in their homes and looking for other ways to kind of enjoy themselves or de-stress, that alcohol sales specifically have been on the decline, whereas cannabis related sales not only maintained, but they actually picked up in some instances. And in many states, cannabis dispensaries, retail dispensaries, were deemed essential businesses throughout the entire lockdown. Whereas, the local, it's hard to believe, but even some restaurants or bars or things like that, they were closed, and the cannabis retail dispensaries were open, which is kind of telling in and of itself.
wow, wow, yeah. I read an article like last week or last month. I don't remember exactly, but I read an article that was talking about the potential of cannabis for the sleeping industry, for the insomnia people that have insomnia issues. Uh, like they can replace around 60% of the synthetic drugs. I mean, it's so much safer, to just use a natural compound and work with it rather than develop a molecule out of blue, right? Uh, uh, wouldn't it be safer if 60% of our medicines were natural? I mean, I think they would, but
Well, as you said earlier, right? I'm not a scientist.
yeah,
These things need to go through the FDA and go through the proper channels and
sure, of
be
course.
approved. And that is one of the things that's going to be interesting as this all evolves, right? Because
Hmm.
there's companies that want to make claims and they want to be able to say that this helps sleep or give you energy or helps, suppress hunger or helps your appetite, but they need to study it and they have to have clinical trials and all of that takes money
Yes.
and you have to have research and you have to be able to back it up and make your claims. And that ultimately goes back to what is one of the major choke points of the industry: access to capital, right? Access to capital and access to the capital markets and access to traditional banking. So
Hmm.
today is a step in the right direction, but there still needs to be a lot done in order for just the individual company to act and operate freely, just as if they were in any other industry. And if they're able to do that, that will put this industry and the companies that operate within it in such a better place. In such a better.
Yes. Yes, but we see that the cannabis sector is growing. You said that there's a lot of anecdotal facts, random facts around this business. Uh, but why do you believe it's still controversial? Because of the bad aspect, the drug aspect. Why do you believe it's still controversial?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with just personal experience and
Hmm.
stereotypes around it, right?
Stereotypes, yes.
Just stereotypes. And if you grew up and you were born in the 40s, 50s, or 60s, alcohol was okay. Cannabis was a drug. It was a quote unquote gateway drug, and it led you down some dark, evil path that you could never get out of if you were a cannabis consumer. And that's what everybody was trained to think. When in reality, if you look at not only the amount of people that are consuming cannabis, but the types of people that are consuming cannabis, it is not the stereotype of yesteryear where the guy or gal is sitting on the couch and they have a bag of chips and they never get up. Like that is not the case. There's a lot of high profile, very famous, successful people that are advocates for the plant, enjoy it, and view it as medicine. So I think it's more just about the stereotype and people's own personal views and personal
Hmm.
personal kind of experiences. And as that becomes something of the past, and as we get to be in a place where this is more normalized, whether it's for adult use and just for your own personal, whatever you want to view it as, relaxation, de-stressing, or if there's actual medical aspect to it. I think as this evolves, it'll just change that stereotype, and you see that, and there's a lot of younger people, call it the 18 to 25 demographic, that are getting away from alcohol. The binge alcohol kind of society that was once there, it's still there for some people, but it's definitely changing and it's definitely evolving.
Hmm.
And I think cannabis is having a big part and a big impact as to why that's happening.
Yes, yes. The alcohol somehow in the past. I mean, I think in 15, 20 years. I don't know, but the idea of drinking, it's not fancy to drink anymore. To get drunk and get high, it's not fancy. No, that's not fancy anymore. That's not sophisticated. That's
Right.
bad. Millennials, I don't know. I don't like to talk about generations because I confuse the letters X, Y, Z. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, alcohol has been declining a bit, right? Because maybe cannabis, I don't know, but I mean, people are very conservative. We know that. That's in some places we have conservative people, Canada, USA, Europe. I mean, a lot of places. Do you believe that that fighting this stereotype is just a matter of time and research, or do you believe that the governments have to put in more effort on advertising and on public messaging? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think it does start with education, right? Because if people don't realize that there are health benefits associated with the plant, then they just view it and associate it with however they already did, right? So if there's clinical studies, as an example, or if there's actual drug development and research that gives you statistical information that backs up a claim, whether that claim is around sleep deprivation or appetite disorders, whatever it might be, if there's actual scientific proof to back it up, I think that will have a large impact on changing people's minds and changing people's perception as to what cannabis actually is. But then, yes, I think that if something were to happen at a federal level, that would immediately change people's minds
Hmm.
because there's so many people that I say that I'm generally involved in the cannabis industry, and they're like, "Oh, I don't want to get arrested." Right? There's nothing that I do that has anything that's. I'm not going to get arrested for being involved in the cannabis industry, right? So I think it's more just education, education, and that's one of the things that we always talk about is education. Like I mentioned the Farm Bill as example. The Farm Bill made hemp completely legal, and that happened in 2018. So CBD exploded onto the scene after that bill was passed. People still think that that's illegal. right? And that is just about education and bringing awareness to it. And
Hmm.
just like there was, the whole war on drugs, there could be similar type of campaigns that talk about the benefits of this, that hopefully could kind of reverse that and put this on a completely different path.
Hmm. Yes, I believe that this is my personal view. I think that the medical use of CBD would be a trailblazer for other products, because once something becomes medicine, FDA approved, and when you talk about the USA, once something becomes FDA approved, I mean, it's safe, right? I think that medical use could be a trailblazer for the recreational and for other uses of the product. I mean, this this is something that we definitely have to go through. And as you said, clinical trials, they're very expensive.
Right.
They're very expensive. We saw what happened 2 years ago with the COVID, and we saw many companies throughout the world racing for to get the solution for that, to get vaccines and to sell them, to spread them around the world. Clinical trials are truly expensive, and that's why we're here, right? Because we are. This is also something we say to our core clients or our core partners. We're not selling cannabis. We're helping people get money, right?
Right.
We're helping people. We're helping people to get capital, to have access to capital. And especially when we talk about cannabis, we have Reg CF, right?
Hmm.
Because it's a great opportunity for companies to turn brand advocates into shareholders, into investors, right? So, how do you feel about that, about Reg CF for the cannabis business?
Yeah, for cannabis specifically, I think Reg CF could really be a game changer for so many companies because of the regulations and because of the way in which you can make a lot of this information publicly available to investors. It could not only change perception, but to your point, you could get your customers to be investors into your business. And if your customers become investors in your business, now they're not only loyal customers, but they're brand advocates, and they're going to do everything in their power to make sure and help you succeed. So I think Reg CF, being that, yes, the old kind of version, if you will, of raising capital for private companies was a private placement. You had to be an accredited investor. Typically, the minimums were 100,000, 250,000, etc. And not everybody had access to that. Not everybody had access to that deal flow. Not everybody's an accredited investor. Not everybody could reach that 100,000, $250,000 minimum. And because of Reg CF and the way in which uh, it was written, you can have that minimum be as low as you want, down to $100, right? So you can open it up to your community. You can open it up to your customers. You can open it up to your fan base, depending upon what your business is. And you can spread that message far and wide, and you can attract a lot of individual retail investors from within and outside of your community. So I think for cannabis specifically, Reg CF, we're very excited about where this goes and how we can play a part in it, because the underlying linchpin of the industry is access to capital. Access to capital, and that's both in capital markets, in banking, and in private markets. And if we can help open that up, I think we'll not only be in a good position for us to be successful, but ultimately help our companies be successful by just gaining attention and gaining awareness when in other situations before Reg CF they wouldn't have been able to do it. Reg CF, and I'd put Reg A plus in that as well.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, of course, Reggae Plus, but we normally emphasize Reg CF when we talk about cannabis
That's
because
right.
of the brand advocate. I mean, usually this kind of product, the community is they are very connected, right? So it should be easier for companies to succeed once they raise capital using the Reg CF, because it's easier for them to connect with their, just like Steve Jobs said, connect the dots, right?
Right.
Normally these niche companies, they know exactly where their dots are, they know where to go, and they know how to navigate through this ecosystem. So Reg CF can be a real game changer for the whole sector, for cannabis, and that's what we're working for, right? Educate. That's what we are doing right now. We're trying to spread a little bit of education, right? To empower people through the private capital markets, as we can help them raise money compliantly, right?
Absolutely,
So,
absolutely. And the
so
one thing I'll say,
yes,
Raphael, if you don't mind, is that going back to something you said earlier, going
yes,
back to the topic around CBD, and also just around kind of awareness and stigmas and perception. I think it's a very interesting point, and you made me think of this. Is that right, wrong, or indifferent? Athletes and celebrities are people that are looked up to, right? People view them as role models in some situations. They emulate to be like them, and they take what they say, very seriously, and they hold them to a very high standard. Well, it's remarkable the amount of people from celebrity, whether they're film stars in the music industry, whatever it might be, as well as athletes that are coming into both the CBD and into the cannabis industry. But if you look at the athletes specifically, there's very well-known athletes that are Heisman winners, that are Super Bowl winners, that are in the Hall of Fame, that have endorsed products, gotten in behind brands, that are actual operators themselves, have made investments into companies, and they are advocates because they know that the benefits of the plant help them tremendously, right? And to your point as to like the CBD being uh, that one that gets in and kind of opens up the gate for others. CBD, again, you have to get the scientific kind of claims behind it, and you have to go through the FDA studies. But there are many people that feel that it helps them tremendously with joint pain, with muscle pain, with backaches, etc. So as that becomes more widely accepted and adopted, that will just make the rest of it that much easier.
yes, athletes, yes. That's something very, very. It was a very good memory because there are some athletes that are involved in the business. Yes, and yes, role models are very important because they are a kind of stereotype as well, right? We
Mm-hmm.
normally use stereotype as a negative word, but it's not. It's just a preconceived idea. It can be good, it can be bad, but I mean,
Right,
it's a stereotype. It's something you preconceived.
right. And
But
then
and
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, no, please, please.
Yeah, and then what I was going to say is that around your comment around crowdfunding and the marketing to your clients, obviously the name is crowdfunding, right? You
Hmm.
need you need a crowd. You need a crowd of people in order for the funding to be successful. And I think that's why it could be so interesting and exciting as this evolves in the cannabis industry specifically, because they do have such a loyal, supporting group of people that are advocates for the brand. And one example would be the beverage market. The beverage market has grown tremendously, right? And it talks to the non-traditional cannabis user coming into the cannabis space, right? Are they going to smoke a joint like what they used to, might they may have been forced to do if they wanted to consume the plant? Now they can have a beverage, right? And to your earlier comment about drinking and it being cool or fashionable, right? Now, if you're at a cocktail party and you have a cannabis, THC, or CBD infused beverage, now from a societal perspective, you look like everybody else. You have a cocktail in your hand and you're consuming it. And it just opens it up to a whole different demographic of people, specifically those that don't like the actual smoke aspect of it. So, just wanted to touch on a few topics that came to mind as you were speaking.
No, yeah, that was great. And you talked about Heisman Trophy winners. I just googled here because I'm a Miami Dolphins fan, and I was right. My memory was right. Ricky Williams, he was a Miami Dolphins running back in the beginning of the 2004, and he is in the cannabis business. I googled it as you were speaking. He played for the Miami Dolphins, and he even got suspended once, and he had a second stint with the Dolphins. Ricky Williams, probably there are others, but I just remember that because I am a Miami Dolphins fan. So I
Yes,
just that just
uh,
came. He was a very strong running back. I remember him. I remember
yes,
him,
yes.
Ricky
Great running
Williams.
back, great person, and yes, he's a very big advocate for the industry and for making a change. So yeah, he's a great example, and there's others like him. But yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah, I really liked him. I really liked him. Today I'm not in my office, but if I was in my office, you would see in the back here, you would see a small reproduction of Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tango Vailoa. I have a miniature of him
Nice,
in
nice.
that
That's
aqua jersey. But yeah, but that's very nice. That's very nice. We talk about role models. We talk about stereotypes, and that's basically it. We're talking about education. But what are your expectations for the next couple of years in the business? I mean, this question, when I thought of this question yesterday, I had one scenario in mind, but now with the decriminalization, that with this pardon that Biden just signed, uh, your answer is probably going to be different.
well, yeah, and so it literally happened right before we got on here. So
Yes.
don't even truly know fully what it means in totality, but it's a step in the right direction. And so it's a step in the right direction as to things just get normalized. And if this becomes an industry that's viewed like any other industry, whether it's alcohol or tobacco, they have to be highly regulated, right? You have to be of age to
Yes.
consume. But as long as that's the case, then you should be able to access capital markets. You should be able to access traditional banking and not get charged fees that are significantly higher than any other industry in which you're competing against. And there's very specific aspects to the cannabis industry that just puts the operators at an unfair advantage, specifically from a tax perspective. And so, as this evolves and as those things and those barriers get broken down, I think it's going to be, a very good industry, an exciting industry to be in, and that's why we're so excited. Is that we
Mhm.
can work with KoreConneX, we can have companies come onto our platform, and we can help facilitate capital into private companies that otherwise they wouldn't be able to access this capital, and we can
Mhm.
do it in a very legal and compliant way, and we can accept that investor dollar, whether they want to do it in an ACH form, they want to do it in a check, submit a wire, or even on their credit card, which you wouldn't
Credit
think
card,
that's a big
yes.
deal. You wouldn't think that's a big deal because every other industry can do it, but for us to do it, it's a big deal. So there's just little things like that, but those little things add up to be very big things. And as all those little things start to get chipped away, then hopefully a few years from now, we're talking, and this is just like any other industry. And there's one aspect to the cannabis industry that, as we speak to investors, it tends to come up a lot, and that is around real estate, right? So, as real estate investors, they see this as an opportunity. Well, I draw a similar kind of comparison to data centers, right? There's data center specific real estate
Mhm.
funds out there that they just focus on data centers. And then obviously they occupy their building with a data center tenant and they get paid their rent. Well, the same thing should be for cannabis, right? We buy an industrial building, we get paid our rent. And as that evolves, then there will just be a specialized, like data center is a specialized REIT. You could have a specialized cannabis REIT. So that's just one example of many as to,
Mhm.
2, 3, 5 years from now. That's ultimately where we get to a place like that.
Yeah, and if it we are working on with cannabis inside the private capital markets, and if it's legal, we know that a lot of countries they follow the USA, the FDA, and if it becomes really legal in the USA, we know that in other countries things tend to change as well, and the the regular banking system will be late, right? Because once you remove the risk from the cannabis business, I mean, the traditional banking system, they will have to come up with a solution. Oh, how can we fund cannabis? But probably the cannabis business will have already found its alternative in the private capital markets, right? So,
Right, right. And that's what's going on so far to date is that if you ask the typical American if they are able to invest into the cannabis industry, most of them will think the answer is no.
mhm.
Those that think that they can think that they can only do it through a public vehicle, like a public security or a public ETF that's traded on an exchange. But that it comes with its own challenges because the U.S. operators that are operating in the United States can't list on a U.S. exchange. So there's issues around that, and that's really what we're excited about is just opening up the access to capital so that the individual American who doesn't think that they can access this industry, they can in these private emerging industries and companies. And so, yeah, we're super excited about the future and obviously partnering with you guys on this.
That's very nice. That's great. So I believe we over half an hour. I believe we could go on for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours maybe talking about that. But I believe we could finish. We could wrap it up. If you have a final message, Brian, if you'd like to speak to our audience, please, the stage is yours. Go ahead, as we can say our goodbyes.
Yeah, absolutely. I would just wrap it up with obviously a thank you to you and the partnership that we've formed with KoreTalkX, and then we're extremely excited to be the conduit to the industry. That's the way that we view ourselves, is that we obviously want to work with companies that are growing, that are accelerating, that are going to be successful in the long run. But ultimately, what we want to do is we want to be that access point as investors come into this industry, view us as a resource, view us as a partner, a source of knowledge and information, and then obviously would love to partner with folks on future endeavors.
Yes, that's very nice to hear. And we at CoreTalkX, we're very happy to have ArcView on board as a great core partner, and we strongly believe that the cannabis business is a very good opportunity. It's not a risk; it's an opportunity, because things are happening and things will happen. We know that. So thank you all for listening to us, for watching us. We are here on LinkedIn Live. We are on podcasts. You can look it up as Core Talks on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. We are here bi-weekly. Who knows? Maybe we can be here more often. And sure, Brian will be back soon enough, and we'll talk. We have plenty of more things to talk about the cannabis business, and we have our event, our Core Summit is coming up in October, the last week of October. It's going to be amazing. Brian's going to be there. ArcView is going to be there as well. And we hope we can see everybody there. Thank you, guys. See you in the next time. See you, Brian, and goodbye.
Thank you. Take care.